Well, there's good news and there's bad news. I think I'll give you the bad news first. The bad news is it's always raining somewhere. The good news is it's always sunny somewhere. You've just got to find that place, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. My name's Kulamitra, and I'm going to be talking to you about the wishless samadhi. I wish. It's a very sort of highfalutin, advanced stage of practice in the Buddhist tradition. So, after you've been meditating a long time and you're finally getting there, you go through this doorway of liberation, the wishless samadhi. That's one of your ways in to enlightenment. So it might be quite a long way down the track for some of us. Some of you may already be there. Don't think I am yet. But I will do my best to bring this a bit down to earth. There's plenty of earth to bring it down to around Buddhafield at the moment. Brought some in with me. And I'd like to start talking about wishless moments. Okay? Maybe the wishless samadhi as a kind of permanent state of eternal satisfaction is a little bit beyond us at the moment. But I bet we've had wishless moments. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's sometimes said that a good time to look for those kind of moments is when you wake up, or say at the end of the day when you've finished work. In India, traditionally, those are the meditation times. So first thing in the morning, say dawn, just as everybody's arising, when you've slept and you're not yet engaged in the day. So sometimes, if you're not in a grumpy mood, just as you wake up, before you kind of reconnect with your life, there's just a kind of open moment where you can just enjoy being there. Likewise, sometimes at the end of the day, maybe this applies more in a kind of traditional culture where you're doing physical work and where you finish the day at sunset. And there's a kind of definite ending. No one's expecting you to stay and do overtime in the office till midnight. So you stop whatever you've been doing and you don't have to do it anymore for that day. And you just sit and you just enjoy, you just look, you just watch that sunset. And that could be a wishless moment. They're the kind of peaceful moments when we're not only not thinking about anything in particular, but when we're kind of in a space which is not really connected with what we think of as our everyday lives. So we're opening up to what's around us rather than being kind of overly concerned with the practicalities of our lives and the people we're responsible for. So I'll just tell you about an experience I had a long, long time ago, before I started meditating, before I became a Buddhist, just to try and give you a bit more of a feeling of what I'm talking about, a wishless moment. So I suppose I was in my late teens, maybe 20, and I was hitchhiking in France. So we are going back a long way. We're going back more than 30 years for sure. Hitchhiking was quite in vogue in those days. You don't see people doing it much these days. But it wasn't particularly in vogue in France. I have to say, it was more of an Anglo thing. In England, you could stick your thumb out in a motorway service station and get a lift. But in France, sometimes you had to wait a long time. So I was in rural France, somewhere on an open road, nothing around. Someone had dropped me off where they turned off, and I was waiting for a lift. And there was a kind of whole process of inner moods that I went through while I was waiting. So first you're just waiting, but maybe with a kind of little bit of expectation. There you are, you're hitchhiking, you've got your thumb out, you're expecting someone to stop and give you a lift, but you're just waiting. You know it's not going to happen straight away. First car goes past, second car goes past, and then maybe you're in touch with the fact that you really want someone to stop. After 10 cars, 15 cars, 20 cars, you're kind of standing there and you're not just waiting anymore. You're waiting with your desire, with your need, with what you want, which is to get that lift and go on to to where you're intending to go. But that's okay, you're just in touch with that. You're still in a way waiting, but you're sort of aware that there's something you want and you're not getting it. But you're hopeful. So another car goes by, and another car, and you look at your watch and you've been there half an hour, been there 45 minutes, been there an hour, and your heart starts to sink. You experience maybe dismay. And then after a while, it's not just dismay anymore, it's frustration. And when a big car goes by with just one driver, you think, they could have stopped. Why didn't they stop? It's obvious I need a lift. They're mean, they're nasty, they're horrible. And that mood kind of takes you over, because it's an hour and a half now and you're still waiting in the baking sun by the side of the road. And you want something, you want a lift. It's not much to ask, is it? You're all alone, you've just got a little rucksack. What's the problem? So you get frustrated, you get angry, you get despairing. And then, maybe after a couple of hours, something else happens. You just give it all up. Because you can't hold it any longer. It's just kind of too much. You know, your own experience is so out of sync with what's actually happening. You can't fit it together. You can't make the lift happen. And in a way, you know you can't make the lift happen. So all this inner bubbling and turmoil and thoughts and feelings is just your stuff. It's just your stuff. It's not going to make any difference. Well, it is actually. Probably by now, you look so awful, no one's going to give you a lift because you're enraged and you're jumping up and down and you're shouting at them as they go past. But what I found was, having stood there for a long time, something just happened, a kind of surrender to the situation that you're actually in. So the bubble bursts of all those different feelings. And sort of miraculously, you're present, you're actually there. Instead of thinking about what you want, where you want to be going, since that's not happening, something in you just kind of pops and you're there, you're present. So what are you present with? You're present with green and vivid blue and gold. So instead of the blackness of your own thoughts, there's the vivid colours of a summer in France. It's probably why you went over there in the first place, isn't it? Yeah. There's green grass, there's green trees, there's the blue sky, there's the lovely touch of the summer air. There's birdsong, and there's joy, because it's so beautiful. And 2 hours you've been standing there and you hadn't seen it. Not at all, not for a minute, because you've been so caught up in yourself and what you want and what's not happening for you. But suddenly, in a way, because it's so not happening, you're able to be there. Because it is so transparently obvious that you're not in control, that you can't be in control, that there's nothing you can do but wait with awareness. So that is like a wishless moment. Suddenly you're not wanting things, you're not angry that you're not getting them, you're not dismayed, you're not disheartened, you're just in your current present experience, and joy rises up in your heart because everything's dropped away except the beauty of being alive. So that's a wishless moment. And surprise, surprise, after you've been standing there experiencing joy and taking it all in for about 10 minutes, someone stops. Because now you look great. You look like the kind of person that someone else would actually like to have in their car. So not only is it wishless and beautiful and great, but it's actually a much more kind of successful place to be in. So that's what I mean by a wishless moment. And I have to say, I found travelling alone, that I kind of stumbled into quite a lot of those moments. And especially at times like that, when you're in between things and you're not in control, and you just have to be with what's going on. And maybe something in you kind of realizes that is even not only a better place, a more enjoyable place to be, but even a more successful place to be when you're traveling. That you need to kind of be in that space to really enjoy it. Otherwise, what's the point? You might as well be at home. You might as well be working. So thinking about that, when I got home, thinking about those kind of experiences, I realised that you can cultivate those moments, at least to some extent. At that stage in my life, I was certainly quite confused about how you cultivate those things. But one of the ways I found I could cultivate it was if I was alone in nature. And if I had the willingness to just wait. So often I found I was living in a city, can't remember what I was doing, working, whatever. But I had some friends who lived in the countryside, and I used to go and stay with them. And I would find that if I kind of just walked out onto my own, they lived on the edge of London, so it was easy to get to. I could go there for, say, a weekend. I found if I just walked out into a field on my own, actually to begin with, I literally couldn't see things because my mind was kind of jumping and jogging. If I tried to look, like I'm looking at you, I would almost like be kind of moving around backwards and forwards, and it would take me quite a long time before my mind would literally settle on a flower or a blade of grass or something like that. So I found, as well as being alone, I would need to make myself wait and not just kind of get up and walk away before my mind had gradually settled. And I remember one occasion when I was doing that, and I was sitting just on the edge of a field by a hedge. And I was just sitting there, and I was just waiting for my mind to settle. And suddenly there was a ferret looking out from under the hedge, right at me, right in the eyes. And again, it was a sort of magic moment. It was totally unexpected. And if I hadn't been kind of cultivating that experience, I would never, ever have seen that ferret. I think that's the only ferret I've ever seen in the wild. Because it would have heard me, I was sitting quietly, I would have walked by anyway. The most I would have been aware of is a rustle in the bushes as it left. So I learnt to do that, but obviously it's a kind of rather time-consuming way of working with your mind. And intuitively, I realised that meditation would be a way that I could have a practice that I could do regularly, which would kind of bring me back to that kind of experience. And that's how I came across meditation, came across Buddhism, 30 plus years ago, became a member of the Western Buddhist order, and end up here with you today. And definitely meditation is a way that you can work with your mind like that. It's a very good place, a very good space to kind of speed up that process of calming the mind, coming back to yourself, preparing yourself, cultivating yourself, just to actually be there, to be present, so that when you come out of meditation, you're not the same person, hopefully, that you went in. Which sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Everybody should try it. I think everybody should do it. I think the world would be a very different place if everybody meditated. But there is still something about that, because if only it was like so easy. I've given you a couple of kind of peak experiences from when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And yes, you can go back through meditation and you can kind of cultivate that. You can work towards peak experiences. But they don't last. They're moments. So when we're talking about this wishless samadhi, we're talking about that as your ordinary, everyday, total experience all the time. And that's really something that you're going to have to work quite hard to achieve, because there's a few things standing in the way. Not too many, okay? I started with good news and bad news. The bad news is that there's a few things standing in the way. The good news is there's only 5 of them. So let's start looking at those 5, because, you know, if you're interested in cultivating your experience, you probably want to know what obstacles you might need to overcome. Sorry, I have to keep taking these on and off. Usually I wear contact lenses, but I'm here with my 2 boys. They're out there somewhere. And my eldest was so excited when we got here, he jumped out the van, punched me in the eye and knocked out my contact lens. So fortunately, I did actually have the backup glasses. Okay. Let's start with something which probably has been much more part of my experience as a percentage than those wishless moments, if I'm honest. Restlessness and anxiety. So restlessness is that physical restlessness. As I said, you know, my experience was that very often when I was trying to calm my mind, I literally physically couldn't actually concentrate immediately. And anxiety is the mental equivalent. So it's the state of mind which makes you physically restless. So when you're in this kind of mental state, you're unable to stop your body moving, and you're unable to stop your mind moving. It's the opposite in many ways of a calm presence, but we all experience it. And when you're in that state, there's a tendency to think that you have to experience it because there's so many things to do. Because you have to be somewhere, you have to do something, you have to look after somebody. There are so many pulls in our lives, so many things on our lists of things that we think we should be doing that demand our attention, that it's very easy for this state of restlessness and anxiety to kind of justify itself. Of course I'm anxious. Don't you know how much I've got to do before tomorrow, before next week, before next year, before I die? Now, unfortunately, that's the deluded mind talking. Not only do you miss out on those wishless moments, but the deluded mind of restlessness and anxiety doesn't understand that that is completely the wrong way to get things done. So in your meditation you can become aware of your mental states, and maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can calm down by using the focus that you're focusing on in the meditation, say the breathing. So as you focus on the breathing, naturally more and more of your attention goes there. For a while, if it's successful, you forget about all those things you need to do. But when you stop meditating, there they are, waiting to be done. So even meditation in that sense is a kind of temporary relief. What's really needed is the beginnings of what Buddhism calls insight. You actually need to see through that deluded state of mind. You actually need to get to the point in experiencing it where you see that that particular state of mind is completely and utterly useless. As I said, it tells you a story that is very important. My anxiety is very important because I have so much to do. But the truth is, through being anxious, you get less done. If you do things in a calm state of mind, you're effective, you're concentrated, you're focused, you get the things that need to be done much better. it's less wearing for you, and usually they go quicker. So an image came to my mind a few years ago. It's a kind of familiar one out there, although I have to say I thought of it because I've got a connection with Africa. And when you're driving through dirt roads, you're going to get stuck sooner or later, mud, sand, whatever it is. You're going to find a road that is difficult, at least, to get through. And what happens if you're not used to that is that as you feel yourself slowing down, you put your foot down hard on the accelerator. The result of that is that you spin the wheels really fast. Loads of mud or sand goes flying in all directions. Your wheel sinks deeper and deeper into the obstacle. Eventually you're up to your axles and you need to get towed out. So to me, that was a really good image for the uselessness of anxiety, because your mind is spinning in that state. I mean, the more you let that get a grip on you, the more your mind spins. It doesn't focus on just one thing you need to do. It goes, oh, I've got to do this, and then I've got to do that, and then this, and then that, and that, and that, and that. So your mind is kind of going really, really fast at that point, but it isn't getting any grip. Now the secret, you need to know this. Those of you who are here in a car or a truck, you need to know this. The secret, I mean, sometimes you can't help getting bogged down, but the way to try and avoid it is to go real slow and steady. You keep your foot as backed off the accelerator as you possibly can. You go in second gear, which keeps the revs down, and you just try to disturb the ground as little as possible to get some grip. And slowly but surely, you go. So it's the same in our lives. But we need to see that. We need to experience it. And meditation in the ordinary sense is a very good way of kind of having those wishless moments, going back to our lives, having a wishless moment, going back to our lives. Gradually, we start realizing that anxiety isn't something we want to be in. And then if you can really see through it like that, at least when it arises, you can sort of know, this isn't going to help. I'm in an anxious state of mind. I can't help that. But what I can do is not feed it, because that is not going to help. It's not going to get me anywhere. So that is the first of those things. And we can deal with it. So, another very common experience, and I've described it already, coming up when I was standing there by the side of the road. Ill will. You don't get what you want, you get frustrated, you get angry, you get resentful, you get hateful. We've all been there. We all go there, probably quite often. It doesn't matter if it's in a small way or a big way. But again, ill will is delusive. Oh, there's a story there, all right. They did something to me, didn't they? They didn't help. They didn't stop, etc., etc., etc. Someone else's fault, isn't it? But ill will is delusive, completely and utterly delusive, completely and utterly useless. It doesn't mean that the world doesn't impinge on you. It doesn't mean that you should be passive. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do something creative to get where you want to go in life. It just means that that particular mental state will never help you get there. So those of you who are as old as me may have read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't know how much Zen there was in it, but there was a lot of motorcycle maintenance, and in those days I used to have a motorbike, so I was very interested in that. And one of his kind of bits of advice is, you know, when you're working on your bike, in those days they were simpler, you could just get out your spanner and do it yourself. When you're working on your bike and you're kind of not quite getting there, and there's something that, you know, let's say a bolt that won't loosen or a part that won't fit in, don't let that frustration and anger get to the point where you take the spanner and sort of smash it forever, you know, into the wrong state. Because that's what happens, isn't it? As we get frustrated, it gets turned back on us. We do this in our relationships. We cause things to happen in our relationships by losing our temper. Who's hurt at the end of it? We are. The other person can walk away and we're left with our broken relationship or our broken motorbike or whatever it is. So here's advice for us: put the spanner down, go and have a cup of tea, come back when you're kind of fresh. It's good advice, and that's what we can do in meditation, If life is getting on top of you, just put it down for half an hour, go and meditate, come back to it a bit fresher. It's very, very good advice. But it's more total than that. And in a way, we need to, again, to kind of push beyond just putting things down and picking them up again. We need to get to the point where we've really seen through the delusive nature of that voice which is telling us in our anger that it's not us, it's someone else that's to blame. The Buddha famously said, hatred is not overcome by hatred, but only by love. But I came across a much better story about this yesterday in the children's storytelling in the evening, where Robin Hood, this is their story, Robin Hood had a magic bow and arrow, and the magic arrow would magically hit his worst enemy. And his worst enemy was King John, because he was such a bad king. But when Robin Hood shot the arrow, it went all the way round and came back and injured him. Some magic arrow, you may think. But the point of the story was that when he was in a vengeful state, he was his worst enemy. So when he shot the arrow, since he was his worst enemy, it came and got him. I thought that was fantastic. Because that is what it's like. That is absolutely what it's like. And it's like even a child can understand that. Can we? Can we actually see through our own experience to the point where we just put it down forever? Okay, maybe it'll rise up again, but at least see through it to the extent that when we get angry, instead of blaming what we think of as the objective situation, we go, no, this voice is delusion. I've seen through this. This will not get me where I want to be. And I'll go and do something about it. Whatever that is, I'll walk away. And just walking away, it can completely change your experience. Actually, I'll tell you a little story. This happened to me about 15 years ago. I was driving. Someone suddenly, just coming up to traffic lights, veered right into me. They were trying to change lanes. And they pushed me right up against the barriers. Of course, both cars were sort of smashed up a bit. So we got away from the traffic lights and we pulled over on the other side. And it was a woman driver, but it was the partner, the male partner, who got out. And he was really angry. Actually, I was really angry because I'd just been driving along and suddenly someone had smashed into me. And he was really angry because he thought it was my fault, not his partner's. So there we were by the side of the road, me saying it was his fault, him saying it was my fault. And something in me just caught that, because road rage is real in London. This was in London. People regularly get stabbed as a result of that kind of thing. And I thought, this is just going to escalate. It's going to just, the fuel to the fire, this is going to burn. Because we're both in shock. And this is really going to go for a conflagration. So I said, well, hang on a minute. Why are we having this argument? Because the insurance company is going to decide anyway. It's not even to do with us. We've just got to report it. Someone else is going to decide what happens. So that kind of cooled it down. A few days later, I got a phone call from this guy saying, okay, talk to his partner. And she said it was her fault, and he admitted it was his fault. So would I please, he didn't want to go through insurance, maybe he didn't have any. Would I please get the damage sorted and tell him what the bill was? So I went and did that. And I had to go and pick up the money from him in 2 goes because he couldn't get, he wasn't a rich guy, didn't just have it. And so I drove, and I was very trepidatious after what we'd been through. So I went with my partner. I said, if I don't come out after 5 minutes, you ring the police. And I parked up outside a kind of council block of flats, and I went in, and he came to the door, and he gave me an envelope with half the money. And he said, can you give me till next month, and I'll give you the rest. So next month I went back, and his partner, the one who'd been driving when we'd had the accident, was there. And she said, oh, just hang on a minute. I'm in the middle of studies. Come in, don't mind the place. It's a bit of a mess. My baby's over there. I'll just keep an eye on her while I go and get you the money. I was standing there thinking, I wish I didn't have to take this money off them. Because I'd connected with them, Contact brings connection. And now I wasn't angry anymore. It's like the human factor comes in. And yet, in the beginning, we could have come to blows. So that's how stupid anger is. That's how useless it is. And it's how much more creative it is if under the same circumstances you can get out of that mental state and get back to something different. So we've done 2. We're doing well. Third one, sloth and torpor. Sloth is the kind of physical, kind of can't quite get my energy together. Torpor is, I'm going now. Well, we all get tired, especially if we're busy, we all get tired, but this isn't that. This isn't something that a good night's sleep or a day off is going to get us over, because there's something behind those states. I mean, if you meditate, you experience these states more directly. And sometimes when I've felt this in meditation, it's like it's got a sort of narcotic pull to it. I mean, you're going. You're not meditating. In a minute everybody's going to hear you snoring in the meditation room. But the pull is so strong, it's like a whirlpool. And when you feel the pull, it's like, I want to go there. I want to go. So what's going on? What's going on? You sat down to be aware, and all you want is to blot out. Well, that's it, isn't it? So, we get in conflict within ourselves. We're not talking about externally. But sometimes there's things within us that don't want to come into awareness, that don't want to be seen. Sometimes that's behind depression in the non-clinical sense as well. Sometimes when we feel very down, it's because we're not prepared to touch base. We're not prepared to actually touch our feelings. Once a feeling is known and felt, actually energy starts to come back into us. So this is the kind of don't want to know. So I think I'll just take oblivion, thank you very much. I had a friend once, this is a long time ago too, he joined a community, a Buddhist community that I had started. And he was a teacher. He was very interested in Buddhism and meditation, but he was teaching. And he started to find, as he kind of upped his meditation practice to daily, that when he was really into meditation, he didn't want to go to work and teach. But he also found if he stopped meditating, he could get into teaching. Now that's interesting. He was in conflict. I don't know why he was in conflict. I don't know what it was about his job that he didn't want to be aware of or could only do if he was not kind of fully aware. Eventually, he did stop being a teacher, and he resolved that conflict in that way. But I found that very, very interesting at the time, that for him the experience was like one or the other, because the awareness from meditation was bringing him too close to the doubts he had about the work he was doing. So if he backed off the awareness, he could kind of keep his job. So you're in conflict. So what happens in your meditation is you go, I'm not going there. I don't want the awareness. Because you're not facing something. You're not willing to face something, whatever it is, within yourself. Sometimes when you find those things, when you learn to listen, it's not actually that bad. Well, it's like here, isn't it? It's raining. If we had a choice, if we were at home and we were kind of like, filling in the form, do you want a rainy Buddhafield or a sunny Buddhafield? We say, oh yeah, I'll have the sunny one. But like all these things, if you're prepared to go with it, if you're prepared to experience it, it's workable, it's doable, something can come out of it. And it's the same with our inner life. So it's true, a lot of things that we experience are painful to us. They're things that we would rather not be having that experience. Even some of the ones I've talked about. Maybe we don't like getting angry. But it's no good just blotting it out. It's no good pretending it's not there. Partly because it will be active anyway. We won't be obviously angry. We'll just be grumpy all our lives. But also because once you touch an experience and open up to it, once you listen, once you look, something magical happens. It stops being the awful thing that you can't experience, that you can't go near. And you find that you can work with it. And sometimes even those things you find there's sides of you which have their good sides as well, like both sides of the coin. So that's something else that we can look out for in our experience. And we can learn to listen to ourselves. We can learn that if for no particular reason we're kind of feeling we've got to, get the chocolate, get the movies, blot out whatever our way is, if we're moving towards that kind of side of our personality, we can just stop for a moment and say, okay, I recognise this. That means something. What do I need to listen to within myself? What is it in my experience that I'm running away from? The Buddha had another sort of rather more enigmatic phrase. He said, it doesn't rain where there's no thatch, so open the thatch and let the rain come in. So what he was getting at is when you like here, we're all in the dry and the rain's out there and we're trying to keep it out. But sometimes that effort of keeping it all out is just too much. Sometimes you'd be better off to pull away the coverings and just let the rain come in. I'm not suggesting we do that right now. But metaphorically, I think he's got a point. So that's 3. So number 4, doubt and indecision. It's the indecision bit here that I think is really interesting, Doubt in English has got different meanings, and you may not believe me, you may be sitting there thinking, is he right, is he wrong? That's fine. Intellectual doubt, honest doubt, that's absolutely fine. But when there's something that you kind of know, but at the same time another sort of avoidance tactic is to question it, endlessly question it, so that it never really happens, then you're not really giving life a chance. So the best way to kind of proceed in life is to do everything wholeheartedly, and then you'll find out what works and what doesn't for you. But when you're sitting on the fence, you can spend a long time there. It's a very painful place to be. I've never met a fence that wasn't sharp. So when you're sitting on the fence, you're saying to yourself, oh, I don't know, should I stay in England or should I go and live somewhere else? So you're not here, you're not there, you're not anywhere in between. If you make your mind up about anything, you'll find out if it was the right thing to do. It has been said that it's better to make the wrong decision than no decision at all. And I think that's actually right. And certainly right in my own experience. Because doubt and indecision is around difficult issues. Maybe difficult emotional issues, things that are difficult to unravel. You can't always know everything first. Sometimes you can only know by plunging in, by trying, by experimenting, exploring. As I said earlier, I've got sort of African connection, and my family, my parents and my brother still live out there. And there was a point when I'd been a Buddhist for about a decade when I thought, I might go back there. And it seemed in a way like a crazy thing to do because there was no active Buddhist movement in that country. That was probably the most important thing to me. But I had all these kind of childhood memories and feelings associated with it. And I thought, no, I can't really let go of those things without going back there and seeing whether I could live there again as an adult, as who I am now. And most of my friends didn't understand what I was up to. Some of them tried to dissuade me. But it was strong emotion, so I followed it. And I got out there, and it didn't work at all. It was a very bad time to be in this particular country. The place was very run down. There was shortages of sugar, salt, flour, you name it. You couldn't get hold of it. People were kind of, I've got some sugar. Have you got any salt? I'll give you some of my sugar. Basics. There was a security problem. I had someone coming around to my door and saying, the police haven't got any vehicles. So I'm trying to get people with vehicles together to take an armed policeman out at night to try and improve security in the area. I'm thinking, oh great, so he's going to shoot to kill, isn't he? So I'm going to be driving the vehicle, and suddenly there's going to be, either I'm going to be dead or the criminal is, Is this what I want? And then finally I was involved in a car accident. I just thought, it's not working. I have to admit it's not working. And do you know what? It's much harder to come back than it is to go. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but if you've packed your bags, all your books, your clothes, everything, and gone, and you've told everybody that's what you're doing, it's very hard to come back again. I mean, quite apart from the kind of, potential embarrassment, it's just you arrive and it's like, what am I doing here? I have no life here anymore. I left. So, but I just have to admit it didn't work. But the good thing is I haven't had those feelings anymore. I went, I did it, it didn't work, I came back, I put it down. So I think that's a fantastic way to do things in a way. It can take up a bit of time, and we've all got stuff, but at least that way stuff gets resolved. Whereas doubt and indecision is about not resolving stuff. And if you don't resolve stuff, it's always there. And it's always eating away at you, it's always draining your energy. And it's always keeping you away from entering for longer into those wishless moments. Hey, we've done 4. So, number 5, this is the big one, okay? Desire. Now, in a way, this is behind all the others. I've never really thought about that before giving this talk. But, usually when we talk about these things as hindrances to meditation, we talk about inappropriate desire. In other words, when you're sitting meditating, it's inappropriate to be thinking about, I wonder what I'll have for supper. But, we usually think it's okay to think about what you're going to have for supper at the right time. But when you're talking about the wishless samadhi, you're talking about actually giving up all desires for everything eventually. And just being prepared to be present with whatever happens around you and respond to that, probably with compassion. But as I thought about this one of desire, I thought not only do all of us have desires, but all those other things I've talked about are really based on a form of desire. So with anxiety and security, I think it's like what we really want is we want the whole world to be a certain way. Maybe as it is now. Maybe what worries us really is that it might change. We might lose a loved one or lose our security. We might die. We will die, actually. But there's a kind of desire behind that, isn't it? We're trying to hold things in a way while they're trying to change. I think that's what produces anxiety. I know when I talked about that, I talked about all the things we have to do. But I think that part of the reason that we can't deal with them in a calm way, in a kind of more intelligent way, is it hooks into a feeling that if we don't do something about them in the way that our anxiety tells us, something terrible will happen, The not getting done of those things will lead to not being loved by the person we were going to do them for, or not being, allowed to keep our job by our manager or whatever it is. So there's a kind of fear there, but that fear is based on kind of wanting something. Ill will, again, when we're really enraged, we want to exterminate. We want something or someone not to be. So we want that. So there's something going on that we don't want to be happening. So we want it to not happen. We want that person not to have said that, or whatever it is. I wanted that car not to have hit me when I was just going from A to B and causing me all that trouble, whatever it is. So there's a kind of desire in that as well, isn't there? With Sloth and Torpor, as I said, really, there's a kind of strong desire not to experience your experience. As I said, the pull of that, and you feel it in meditation, that sort of narcotic pull, there's a desire involved in that. I want to go to that space. If only I could blot out forever, And that's what's behind addiction as well. I mean, in a way, it's quite a good strategy, except it doesn't work. I told you that I came back from Africa after a car crash, and that car crash had really unsettled me and really thrown me into a very anxious state. And when I got back to London, my parents keep a flat in London, so I went to stay there. And my dad has a drinks cabinet. I thought, I know, I need a stiff drink, So I had a stiff drink, which is not something I would normally do. And it did absolutely nothing. And I thought, I need another one, And it did absolutely nothing. And I thought, I know why. Because I need the whole bottle to obliterate my experience now. My experience that I don't want to be having is so strong, I need the whole bottle. And when I wake up in the morning, I'll need another bottle. So I, in a way, for the first time, could sympathise with people that can't face something so strongly that they have to obliterate their experience on a daily basis. But there's a very strong desire in that. It's a desire not to have the experience you're having. And it's an uncreative desire because you're not finding a genuine way out of it. So fortunately for me, I had enough sense to think that is not a workable strategy. I'm just going to have to face this some other way, even though I don't know how. But, if only it was, I would have drunk a bottle if it would have solved the problem. Doubt, indecision. It's kind of unclarity. We want unclarity. We kind of create a situation in which unclarity rules. And we want that unclarity because it's a risk scenario. If you follow through on some difficult, unknowable future, you could get it wrong like I did. So there's kind of a high risk, or that's the way we see it, in making the decision at all. The risk is we might be wrong. So I'd rather not make any decision. So again, it's something in that, isn't it? We want to be right, we want to be successful. We need to accept somewhere that learning is about failing and learning from failing. Give life a chance, and at the same time, learn, be open. So getting back to desire itself, it has been said that the grass is always greener on the other side. It's also been said, out of the frying pan into the fire. So we always want things. We always want things to be better, to be different. But our wanting is as useless and delusive as any of those other things that I've talked about. Sometimes even people we know and love can see that all we're going to do is jump from the frying pan into the fire. We don't usually listen, do we? We just get burnt. The thing is, as I said at the beginning, the bad news is it's always raining. The good news is there's always sunshine. But in our lives, there is always suffering. There's always things that don't go as well as we would like. There's always things we have to do that we don't want to do, people we have to be with we don't want to be with, people we want to be with that we can't be with. And desire presents itself as a solution to all of that, doesn't it? A wonderful solution. Because my desires will be realised and then I'll be happy. But it's a complete delusion. No one's desires are ever realised for more than a moment. You know, you can sometimes get something you want. But as you grasp hold of it, it's changing, it's moving, it's disappearing. It's going like sand through your fingers. And, you know, what happens next? I was listening to, you see, I'm showing my age again. I was listening to Love Forever Changes. Is anybody aware of that album, Love Forever Changes? Yeah, it's fantastic. And in one of the songs, they were talking about impermanence. And the phrase was, for every happy hallow there will be goodbye. So it's inevitable. It's just inevitable. Sometimes we talk about, you know, for everything that's born there will be a death. That's inevitable. But actually they're more spot on, because it's like that emotionally. For every happy hallow there will be goodbye. There has to be. You can't have the one without the other. So our desires present themselves to us not as this would be nice, that's just a preference, but as when I get this, when I achieve that, when I do that, I will be happy, and it will be kind of fixed, and it never is. So what do we do? What do we do? All these fantastic strategies that don't work. The only strategy that works in the end is give it up. Let it go. And that really does work. A few years ago I was on a Buddhafield retreat. It was an elements retreat, which seemed really appropriate because we'd had a wet summer and it was in September, and everybody arrived hoping for a lovely Indian summer, and it rained every day for 10 days. And it was at the Broad Henbury site, which is on 2 levels. So, you know, it was like here, it was like really slushy, but you had to get from, the kitchen was on one level, the shrine room was on another. You had to get up and down this kind of mud bath. And the worst day of the retreat was when the shrine room flooded. Well, I have to say, a couple of guys just got a couple of shovels, got all the carpets up, dug a trench, boarded it over, and by evening we were in a dry shrine room. It was amazing. But I could see when we got there and the rain started, I just thought to myself, okay, this can go either way for me. I've come here with the same expectations as everybody else of finally a bit of sunshine. And if I go with that, I'm going to have a seriously unpleasant time. But if I can work in meditation to avoid that, it'll be okay. And I had the most fantastic retreat, because every single day I just had to open up some more. My worst moment was that there was one morning when the sun came out, and my worst moment was like at lunchtime when the rain came back. That was tough, you know, just to open up one more time. But when it was raining all the time, it's just like, open some more, open some more, open some more. And my best point was they had desperately tried on this kind of long ramp to do something about the mud. They put down some corrugated sheets of iron, you know, to try and stop you sinking welly deep into the mud. And I was coming down one day, and it took off. And I just had to surf down to the bottom. And do you know, it was the best retreat I've ever been on. Because there was no choice, you know. And the thing is, there actually isn't a choice. You know, it's a tough call, but I have to tell you, there really isn't a choice. It's just your delusion that tells you there is. So the only thing you really can do, apart from adopting a provenly unsuccessful strategy, as I have now pointed out, is just open up to the wish list. Open up to that inner space where you can be present and respond. It's not a passive state. It's an active, creative state, but in which you're not trying to control things anymore. You're not having that delusive expectation that you can be the one that makes things happen the way you want. So, it's good, isn't it? It's only 5 things to overcome. It's not many. It really helps to meditate and kind of work your way through some experience of those things yourself. Bring them into awareness. Work with them. Fail. Don't overcome them. Know that you haven't. Know that it was a disaster. Come back to it again. But as I said, eventually, you know, in between all those other now moments that you will have, if you want to go the whole hog, if you want to go the whole way, you need to see through those things. At least to the extent that you don't believe in those useless, delusive strategies any longer. And the more you can see through them, the more you'll avoid them, the more you'll open up to what's in front of you, the more you will enter into that doorway of endlessly creative response to life. Thank you.